Good afternoon, everyone. This is Maria Angela Boncalos from Group 2, and today we will be discussing about the estimation and basic calculation in poultry production. So, to start our lesson, let us first define the term that we are going to use in our discussion. First, we have the broiler. Broiler refers to the chicken intended for meat purposes. The cost, the value of money that has been used to produce something and hence is not available to use anymore. Enterprise refers to the business or firm, an organization engaged in the trade of goods, services, or both consumers. So next is the feed conversion ratio, the amount of feed consumed in order to produce a kilo of meat. Next, we have the input, term denoting either an entrance or changes which are inserted into a system and which active modify the process. Mortality rate refers to the percent of dead animals. Records, an item or collection of data. A starter feed is given to 10 to 20 kilograms of winners until the pigs are about 3 months old and weigh 30 to 35 kilograms. The swine, collective term used to denote hog or pig. A system, a set of elements often called components instead, and the relationship which are different from the relationships of the sets of its elements to the other elements or sets. The temperature refers to the degree of hotness and coldness. So my topic is estimation and basic calculation in poultry production. So why it is important to study poultry farming? Because it is the most important aspect in the agriculture. It is an important and diverse component since egg and meat, chicken meat, are part of the health and diets for the larger population in the Philippines and in the world. The farming system as a whole, and animal production in particular, is influenced by internal factors including the government policy, the rural development, the livestock development programs, and marketing, which must be considered in any analysis or evaluation. Feeding has been an essential in poultry production and determining the value of ration given to animals by estimation or the calculation. So why it is important to study estimation and calculation in poultry? Because they are responsible in the growth of the poultry products. So there are three types of feed. First is the starter feed, which I have mentioned in the definition of terms. It is given to 10 to 20 kilograms winners until the pigs are about 3 months old and weigh 30 to 35 kilograms. It contains 18% of crude protein or CP and 3,250 kilocalories of digestible energy. Next, we have a grower feed. It is given until the pigs reach a weight of 60 kilograms. Grower ration contains 60% of crude protein and 3,200 of kilocalories of digestible energy or TE. Last, we have the finisher feed. At 60 kilograms, the pig's ration is shifted to finisher feed. It is given to finisher pig up to 80 to 90 kilograms ready for the market. The ration contains 14% of CP or the crude protein and 3,200 kilocalories of digestible energy. The feeding method. There are three feeding methods for finishers that are restricted, finishers are restricted feeding, the ad libitum, the combination of ad libitum, and the restricted. The level of feeding can vary from the restricted feeding, about 80% of satisfaction, and ad libitum level of 100% satisfaction. So why it is important to study feeding methods? The feeding methods is the most important part in the, aside from the feeds that are going to use, feeding method should be appropriate in the growth of the pigs and the process or the growth pigs. So we have here the restricted feeding. In restricted feeding, the amount of feed given is controlled or limited to a certain amount just to satisfy the appetite of the pig. We have here the advantages of and disadvantages of restricted feeding. The advantages of restricted feeding is that the better feed conversion ratio or FCR, lower feed costs and the better performance, good carcass quality, better health control since the feeding are restricted, less digestive problem. These are the disadvantages of restricted feeding. The lower average of daily gains since the food that were given to the pig or yes the pig were limited only. The unequal growth, especially if feed trough is not long enough to accommodate all the pigs. More laborious, yes. Less chance of coping with the higher market price since uh, there are controlled in the growth of the pigs. The restricted feeding is done through the use of the long feeding trough where all pigs eat at the same time. However, the length of the trough should be long enough to accommodate each fattener during feeding time. A good criterion for restricted feeding is that the trough should be emptied for 15 to 20 minutes if given a slope. For dry mash or the pelletized feeds is normally consumed in 20 to 30 minutes rather. The level of feeding is based on the growth of the pigs. In restricted okay sorry next is the ad libitum feeding. It is a feeding without restrictions and feed is made available anytime. This feeding method should be practiced if pigs finish have high growth potential and they are in the good health only. The advantages of ad libitum feeding is that higher ADG is achieved, less feed competition, less laborious. For the disadvantage, the ad libitum feeding have the chance of have a higher chance of thicker back fat, higher feed conversion ratio, high since it was not limited. The feeds were not limited. Next is more digestive problems in younger pigs, less control on health problems. In ad libitum feeding, dry feed should always be used for this feeding method. Fresh feed improves the feed intake and feed efficiency. Thus, self-feeders should be emptied and cleaned at least once a week to prevent a microbial spoilage. Pigs find infested feed unpalatable, thus wastage of feed is high. Continuously support of fresh and clean water is important in the ad libitum feeding because water intake increases when this method is practiced. So the last method is the combination of ad libitum and restricted feeding. Pigs in this method are fed ad libitum until they reach the weight of 50 kilograms and feed restricted until they are marketed. With this feeding method, the growth potential of the animal can be maximized during its first kilogram of growth, and restriction is practiced to reduce back fat thickness with corresponding increase in the lean cut yield since the ad libitum have the higher chance of thicker back fat. In this, we have the advantages: the higher ADG with good carcass quality, the lower feed cost, the better use of good feed or better FCR. But however, there are also advantages in the combination of this method. First is the higher possibility of digestive problem if shifting is not properly done. So if you are going to use the combination of ad libitum and restricted feeding, it is important that you have knowledge first in shifting of the two processes. Next is the less control of health problems and feed intake at the start. So to determine the FCR, or the feed conversion ratio, we must use the formula below. Feed conversion ratio equals feed consumed kilogram divided by the gain in weight kilogram. There are broilers requirements. A. The following space requirements may serve as a guide. Number 1, day old to 3 weeks, 0.3 feet chick. The 3 to 4 weeks, the 5 weeks to market age 1.0. The recommended minimum feeding space requirements that they old to 4 weeks to 2.5 to 5 centimeter, 4 weeks to 8 weeks, 5 to 6.5 centimeter, 9 weeks to near lying age, 7.5 to 9 centimeter. C. The recommendation minimum watering space requirements, the day old to 4 weeks or 0.5 centimeters bird or long, 1 gallon of drinking fountains, 100 birds. 4 weeks to 8 weeks, 0.6 to 1 centimeter bird or 2 gallon drinking fountains, 100 birds. 9 weeks to near lying age, 1 to 2 centimeter for 4 2 gallon drinking fountains, 100 birds. And we have here the recommended brooding temperature for broilers at the age of weeks. For the 0 to 1 week old of chicks, the the brooding temperature should be 32.2 to 35 degree Fahrenheit or 90 to 95 Fahrenheit. 32, For the week 1 to 2, we have 29.4 to 32.2 degrees Celsius or 85 to 90 degree Fahrenheit. For the 2 to 4 weeks of chicks, we have 26.7 to 29.4 degrees Celsius or 85.90 degree Fahrenheit. Above 4 weeks, above 4 weeks, the chicks must remove from the supply of heat. So, that's all for my discussion, and the next reporter will discuss the continuation of this topic.